I was single for most of college, but I never went to bed alone because I always had my smartphone. And this didn't change until 6 years after graduation. Looking back, this is because I was afraid to be alone, and the smartphone was a source of comfort. Well, it turns out I wasn't alone. 92% of people check their smartphone within 15 minutes of waking up, and only 5% of people sleep with their phones outside of the bedroom. This is data from my most recent study, Stuck in the Screen, where I surveyed over 1,000 Americans about technology's effect on communication and relationships. One of the respondents noted that smartphones bring with it an expectation of 24/7 availability. We're always feeling like we're on because of the smartphone. And one of the biggest correlations in the data was that people who feel like they cannot unplug at work also feel like they cannot unplug socially. The boundaries between personal and professional life have largely been erased because of the smartphone. Another person said that responding to texts feels like friend homework. Now think about that. Friends are the people that we choose to spend our life with, and it should be fun to communicate with them. But sometimes even that can feel overwhelming. Now, before I get into some solutions about how we might stop being stuck in the screen, I want to take a step back and talk about how we got here. Well, the Silicon Valley mindset, one with which we're probably all very familiar, is prioritizing moving fast and breaking things. And while that can be beneficial in some cases, it doesn't take into account the negative externalities of technology and values speed above everything. And when we value speed above everything, we get into hypercommunication territory. Hypercommunication is excess inbound or outbound communication precipitated by technology. Hypercommunication can be fun. You know that feeling when you're in a group chat and everyone's responding at the same time and you're laughing to yourself? But it can also be overwhelming. I'm sure many of you in the audience have come out of a meeting or class and saw so many notifications and felt overwhelmed. Microsoft and LinkedIn found evidence of hypercommunication in a 2024 report where they found that we receive 4 emails for every one that we send. Gloria Mark has been researching digital distractions for over a decade and found that our average attention span on a single screen is just 47 seconds, under a minute. What's even more interesting is that to get back to our focused state, it takes over 23 minutes. And this is because of something called the tension residue. Instead of something sticky on our fingers, it's something sticky in our brains. But what's sticky is not the task at hand, it's the distraction. So when we think about how to create solutions on an individual level, what to do about all this, often it's create the problem, solve the solution. Here's a digital detox, or here's a quick fix. And I did do a week without a smartphone in New York City, which was a lot of fun, but that's not a realistic solution in our everyday lives. In fact, in my study, 67% of people said that they could not easily go 24 hours without a smartphone. And this isn't because they necessarily didn't want to. It's because of a combination of work and social pressures. So what to do? Here are 3 ways that we can stop being stuck in the screen. And these are sociotechnical solutions, understanding that largely people don't exist in a vacuum outside of technology, but also technology should be understood with human inputs. And I want everyone in the audience to think when they hear these solutions about how it might work within the contours of your everyday life and the commitments that you have. The first solution to stop being stuck in the screen is to be aware of when your smartphone is turning into a third person. One respondent from my study noted that the phone can act like a third person in any kind of relationship. Whether it be friends, colleagues, or romantic partners, I'm sure many of us have been there. You're talking to someone so excited, and they're on their phone. Well, one strategy you can use is just pause. It sounds simple, but it does work. And ask yourself, does that third person belong in the room? Sometimes distractions are inevitable, but if you're the one on your phone, maybe just say to the other person, hey, I just have to write this quick email, and then carry on the conversation so the other person doesn't feel hurt. The second solution to stop being stuck in the screen is no phones in the bedroom. Now, I began this TEDx talk by saying that I used to begin every morning on my smartphone, but this changed on the 5th of September 2022. I woke up and my phone was dead, my phone charger was nowhere to be found, and my now husband was asleep. The only thing within sight was the book I was reading at the time, Society of the Spectacle by Guy Debord. I had carried that book around with me everywhere for 3 months, trying to get back into reading because I felt like my attention span had been short-circuited as a result of the pandemic. It had taken me 3 months to get through the first 50% of that book, but in that morning, I got through the final 50% in just a few hours. My brain felt lighter, things felt easier, and this is because I was off of my phone. So for the past 3.5 years, since the 5th of September 2022, I've begun every morning reading before any smartphone or computer use. I've decreased my screen time by 65%, and my focus has really been improved downstream. One of the reasons for this might be because of something called sleep inertia. Sleep inertia is a transitional phase in the morning between sleep and wake, that first 15 to 30 minutes of our day. During this time, our brain is especially susceptible to the inputs that we're giving it. And so waking up and going on your phone is akin to eating sugary cereal or ripping 3 tequila shots. Just not what you really want to be doing as soon as you wake up. Power on slowly. What I've noticed over the last decade in my research is that spaces like the bedroom, that once were a place only for intimacy and relaxation, are no longer sacred. But it's not just the bedroom. It's places like the dinner table, public transportation, parks, movie theaters. The smartphone has infiltrated all of them. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, I use my phone as an alarm clock. Well, then use it as an alarm clock. But as we all know, the devices are designed to be addictive, so if you're finding that to be difficult, maybe purchase a used alarm clock. It doesn't have to be something that's expensive. If you live in a college dorm or a studio apartment, perhaps put the phone on the other side of the room. Really what it's about is no smartphones in sacred spaces, and about you defining what those sacred spaces mean to you. The third strategy to stop being stuck in the screen is losing track of time, specifically through the dérive. Literally translated from French, this means drifting. And this concept was popularized by the Sociologists, a French revolutionary group from 1957 to 1972. I first discovered the Sociologists through a song lyric by the 1975, "The poetry is in the streets, la poésie est dans la rue." The way that the Sociologists found poetry in the streets is through the dérive. Now, a traditional walk, you're going from point A to point B. In a dérive, when you're drifting, you're letting yourself be taken by your surroundings, and you're being drawn by the encounters that you might have. Now, you might think to yourself, that sounds great, I would love to drift and lose track of time, but that's not realistic within my everyday life. Well, this drifting doesn't have to happen during long stretches of time like a vacation, although it can. It can happen during a few free moments. 58% of people in my recent study said that the first thing that they do during a free moment is check their phone. Maybe it's about just taking some of those in-between moments and letting ourselves daydream, rediscovering why that's important, allowing ourselves to be bored, because sometimes that's where we find those moments of ideation, creation, and connection. Now, it doesn't have to be just through walking where we can drift. Hobbies can also be important. I fell in love with film photography, and that was a great way to drift. Now, the way that you can adapt this practice amidst technological modernity, this world that we live in today, a few different ways. First, you can meet with a friend and not overschedule the rest of your day. Sounds a bit crazy, but it can be something that makes a big difference. Next is exploring different parts of your city outside of your neighborhood, starting with a fixed point, allowing for drifting. At one point, I would just go down to the subway and get off at a random stop and just start to walk around. You don't have to do that, but starting at different points and exploring places outside of your normal routine can be really beneficial. A simpler way to do this might just be to not use headphones during the first 15 minutes of your walk. Really experience that sense of place directly. You can also chunk time on your calendar, which is having blocks of time where, again, you have that room for ideation, creation, connection, that time for deeper thought. So the 3 strategies that I've spoken about today to stop being stuck on the screen are: first, be aware of when your smartphone is turning into a third person. Second, no phones in the bedroom, but really no phones in sacred spaces. And third, finding space to drift and lose track of time outside of the screen whenever possible. These strategies are sociotechnical strategies, and it's about designing your sociotechnical future. Well, this doesn't really mean throwing away your smartphone, and it didn't for me. You might be surprised to learn that I actually met my now husband through a smartphone, through a not-so-creative opening on a dating app. But we didn't just connect through a screen. Our first date was a dérive. We drifted. We met for lunch and allowed ourselves to be connected and lose track of time. We went to a state park, several beaches, ended up going to dinner. And yes, I got home and I was excited that he had texted me. My best friend, who's in the audience, we first met in pre-K, and through our lives having different paths, we had lost touch, and she reached out to me in 2016 on Instagram. We were the maid of honor in each other's weddings, and that might not have happened had it not been through a screen. And I think these stories explain the full spectrum of what it's like to be on screens today. Is that, yes, sometimes we can make these new connections through screens, and sometimes that can be beautiful. But we have to remember that the poetry is not only in the streets. It's in the space between, in the moments that aren't pre-scheduled and pre-planned, the ones that we might miss if we're constantly stuck in the screen. Thank you.